The Mafia boss found his secretary locked in a basement, but the moment he touched her frozen hand, Adrian Cross knew the truth. He had not come in time. Chicago rain hammered the abandoned warehouse while smoke curled through the broken doorway. Natalie Hayes lay against a concrete wall, wrists bound, lips pale, still wearing the blouse she had worn to work 3 nights earlier. She had warned him that someone inside his empire was preparing to betray him. He had told her they would talk tomorrow. Most people know that kind of pain. The moment you realize someone was asking for help and you were too distracted to listen. This is not only a story about a kidnapping. It is about loyalty, power, regret, and whether love can survive after trust is broken. Stay until the end. Like the video and comment where you are watching from. 3 nights before I found Natalie Hayes on that basement floor, she stood 10 feet from my desk and asked me to look at her. I looked at my phone instead. That was the part I remembered most clearly afterward. Not the warning itself, not Grant Holloway walking into the room, not the call that pulled my attention toward another crisis. I remembered the blue light of the screen against my hand. I remembered Natalie waiting. I remembered how easy it had been to believe she would still be there when I finally decided to listen. At 7:15 that Monday morning, Chicago had not yet decided whether it wanted to rain or snow. The sky hung low over the river, gray and heavy, and the wind drove yesterday's slush against the curbs in dirty ribbons. Cross Consolidated rose above River North in 42 floors of black glass and steel. To the public, it was a logistics company with shipping contracts, commercial properties, and warehouses stretching from Illinois to the East Coast. To the men who knew my father, it was something else. It was the clean face of an old empire. My family had spent 3 generations moving goods no one was supposed to see, settling arguments no judge would hear, and collecting debts no bank would record. By the time the company passed to me, most of the violence had moved behind conference room doors. The guns had not disappeared. They had simply become less visible. I preferred it that way. Fear was useful, but it attracted attention. Money moved more quietly. Natalie understood that world without ever pretending to belong to it. She stepped from the elevator that morning wearing a charcoal coat over a cream blouse, her dark hair pinned at the base of her neck. She carried 2 folders, 1 coffee, and the expression of a woman who had already solved 3 problems no one else knew existed. The lights on the executive floor were still dim. The overnight cleaning crew had left a vacuum beside reception. One of the orchids near the windows had started to lean toward the glass. Natalie set the coffee on her desk, took off her coat, and went straight to work. She turned on the lights 1 section at a time. She checked the security report from the previous night. She opened the calendar she had rebuilt after midnight. She canceled a breakfast with a real estate developer whose offices were being searched by federal agents. She changed the route for my afternoon drive after noticing construction barriers near the west entrance. She sent a message to the kitchen downstairs asking them not to put walnuts in Mason Reed's lunch because Mason would never admit they made his throat itch. Then she walked to reception, lifted the orchid from its pot, loosened the soil with 1 finger, and turned it away from the cold window. No one had asked her to save the plant. That was Natalie. She noticed what was slowly dying before anyone else saw the damage. At 7:30, the private elevator opened. Mason stepped out first. He was 6 feet 4 broad through the shoulders and wearing the same dark suit he had worn the night before. His hair was damp from the weather. A shallow cut marked the edge of his jaw. I followed him into the office. Natalie looked up once. Her gaze moved from Mason's face to my right hand. There was dried blood across my knuckles. She closed the file in front of her. "Good morning." Mason walked past her desk. "Depends who you ask." Natalie looked at me. "What happened to your hand door?" Her eyes lowered to my knuckles again. "Did the door survive?" "No." She reached into the top drawer of her desk, took out a small bottle of antiseptic and a packet of gauze, then set both beside my coffee. I did not stop. My office. The antiseptic works better when opened. I know how it works. You have been bleeding on imported leather for 20 minutes, so I have my doubts. Mason coughed into his fist to hide a laugh. I turned my head. He immediately found the view outside fascinating. Natalie held out a thin folder. Your 8 o'clock moved to 9. I did not approve that. You would have. Why, the attorney representing Daniel Mercer was arrested at 6 this morning. Federal fraud charges. 2 reporters are waiting outside Mercer's home, and a third has been calling this office since 7. I took the folder from her. You canceled the meeting. I moved it. Canceling it would look nervous. I opened the first page while walking. What did you tell Mercer that your schedule had changed? Did he believe you? No. I looked back. Natalie picked up her coffee. Good morning to you too, Mr. Cross. She only called me that when she wanted distance. Usually she called me Adrian when no one else was around. In front of executives, she used Mr. Cross. When she was irritated, the title became precise enough to cut. Mason followed me into my office and shut the door. The room occupied the northeast corner of the building. The windows overlooked the river, the bridges, and a stretch of Michigan Avenue disappearing into the morning haze. My father had chosen the office because he said a man should be able to see who was coming for him. I had kept the view. I had changed everything else. His dark wood desk had been replaced with black stone. The walls were bare except for a map of Chicago and one photograph of my parents taken before I was born. Mason dropped into the chair across from me. You could ask her to dinner. I opened Mercer's file. No, you did not even pretend to think about it. She works for me. That does not stop you from watching her walk away. I lifted my eyes. It should stop you from speaking. Mason smiled. You are right. Silence has always solved emotional problems. We do not have an emotional problem. Of course not. He leaned back and looked through the glass wall toward Natalie's desk. She was standing beside a junior assistant correcting something on a printed schedule. The assistant's face was red. Natalie said something that made the young woman breathe again. Mason watched me watching her. You know everyone else sees it. Sees what that she is the only person in this building who tells you no without checking where the exits are. That is because she knows the exits. That is not why. I placed Mercer's file on the desk. Tell me about the Southside shipment. The smile left Mason's face. Business did that to people in my office. It taught them when a conversation was over. One of our trucks had been stopped near Archer Avenue after midnight. The driver claimed police had searched the trailer and found nothing. The problem was that no city unit had reported the stop. Someone had wanted the driver to believe he had been questioned by police. Someone was testing how quickly word reached me. Mason gave me the details. I asked for names, times, routes, and camera footage. By the end of the conversation, I had forgotten the antiseptic on my desk. Natalie had not. She entered without knocking 20 minutes later and set the open bottle beside my hand. Mason stood. I was leaving. You were avoiding work, she said. That too. He passed her near the door. Tell him dinner is a normal human activity. Natalie looked from Mason to me. What is he talking about? Mason is tired. I am observant. You are leaving. He raised both hands and stepped into the hall. Natalie closed the door behind him. The change in her face was immediate. The dry humor disappeared. Her shoulders remained straight, but I saw tension in the way she held the folder against her chest. She crossed the office and placed it on my desk. I need 10 minutes. You have 5. I need 10. I checked the time. The Bellucci call starts in 12. Then you should listen quickly. There were very few people in Chicago who would speak to me that way. Most of them were dead. Natalie pulled out a chair, but did not sit. Someone used an inactive executive keycard to enter the archive floor at 12:46 this morning. Which keycard? It belonged to Thomas Greer. The name meant nothing for half a second. Then I remembered. Greer had been our vice president of freight operations. He had died of a heart attack 11 months earlier. His credentials were canceled. They should have been. I opened the folder. The first page showed entry records from the archive floor. Who found this? I did. Why were you reviewing overnight access? Because 3 invoices came through yesterday from Lakefront Mechanical. I turned the page. What is unusual about them? The work was never completed. How do you know they billed us for replacing ventilation controls on floors 38 through 40? The controls were replaced last year by another contractor. That could be duplicate billing. It could. Her tone told me she did not believe it. I looked up. What else? 2 drivers requested route changes within an hour of receiving deposits from an account connected to Lakefront Mechanical. How much? $20,000 each. Do the drivers know where the money came from? They claim they do not. Do you believe them? No. I leaned back. Have you spoken to security? I sent the files to Mason. Then Mason will handle it. Natalie did not move. There is more. I waited. She set a photograph on the desk. It showed a maintenance worker near the service elevator. The angle was poor. His face was partly turned away. He was on the archive floor yesterday afternoon. Did you identify him? Lakefront says he does not work for them. Could he work for a subcontractor? They have no record of him. I looked at the picture again. The man wore a Navy uniform with a white company patch over the chest. A tool case sat near his feet. Nothing about him looked unusual. That made him unusual. People who belonged in my building usually looked nervous. This man looked comfortable. What did he touch a camera near the service elevator? Was it damaged? No, then why replace it? He said the lens was malfunctioning. Was it no? Natalie's fingers tightened around the edge of the folder. He had a work order with Mason's authorization, and Mason says he never signed it. I closed the folder. Send me everything. I already did. Then what do you need from me? Her expression changed by a fraction. It was not anger. It was something closer to disbelief. I need you to understand that these are not separate mistakes. You do not know that. I know someone used a dead executive's keycard. I know a false contractor entered a secured floor. I know 2 drivers received unexplained money. I know someone copied Mason's authorization. You know there are irregularities. I know someone is testing how closely you are watching. I am always watching. Natalie held my gaze. Not everything. The room went quiet. Rain tapped against the windows. Somewhere beyond the glass wall, a phone rang at reception. I should have asked what she meant. Instead, I looked down at the clock on my desk. The Bellucci call was in 7 minutes. Natalie. The door opened. Grant Holloway entered without waiting for permission. He had been doing that since I was 12. Grant was 52, silver-haired, and always dressed like he expected to be photographed. My father had trusted him with Routes collections negotiations and once with my life. When I was 16, Grant had pulled me behind a stone wall seconds before a car exploded outside a restaurant in Cicero. For years, I believed that memory made him family. He glanced at Natalie, then at the folder. Am I interrupting? Yes, she said. Grant smiled. That is refreshing. You could knock? I could. He did not apologize. Grant walked to the windows and looked down at the river. The Belluccis are ready. I will call them in 5 minutes. They prefer video. They can prefer whatever they like. Grant's eyes moved toward the photograph on my desk. What is this? Natalie answered before I did. A false maintenance worker accessed the archive floor. Grant picked up the image. False Lakefront Mechanical has no record of him. Contractors subcontract. He used a deactivated keycard. Grant looked at me. Then security made a mistake. He also carried a forged work order. Grant's attention returned to Natalie. There was no surprise in his face, only patience. Miss Hayes sees conspiracies in filing errors. Filing errors do not use dead men's security cards. Grant placed the photograph on the desk. Secretaries should be careful when accusing executives. Natalie's chin lifted. I did not accuse an executive. You said the threat came from inside. I said the access came from inside. Grant smiled again. You are very precise. She has to be, I said. The smile faded. Natalie is doing her job. Grant turned slightly toward me. Of course. The room held something I did not yet have a name for. Not conflict, recognition. Grant and Natalie looked at each other like 2 people standing on opposite sides of a locked door. I noticed it. I did not understand it. That failure mattered. I turned to Natalie. Send the complete report to Mason. Have him lock the archive floor and suspend both drivers. I already sent the report. Then let security investigate. I think you should review the payments yourself. I will. When after the Bellucci meeting? You said that yesterday. Grant looked toward the window to hide his amusement. I felt my patience thin. Then remind me tomorrow. Natalie went still. It lasted less than a second. Then she reached into the folder and placed a small black flash drive beside my hand. In case tomorrow's too late. She left the office before I could answer. Grant waited until the door closed. She has become bold. She is competent. Competence becomes dangerous when people confuse access with authority. I looked at him. Are you threatened by my secretary? No. His answer came too quickly. Grant adjusted one cuff. I am concerned that she has forgotten the limits of her position. She knows exactly what her position is. Does she? He nodded toward the closed door. She controls your calendar screens, your calls, knows every building you enter, every route you take, every captain you distrust. Your father would never have given one civilian that much access. My father kept men close because he expected betrayal, and he survived as long as he did because of it. He was murdered in his own car. Grant's jaw tightened. The old wound opened between us. My father had died on a freezing February night outside a private club in Oak Park. The driver was family. The gunman was family. The man who gave the route was family. Blood had never guaranteed loyalty. Neither had fear. Grant turned away. The Bellucci's are waiting. I left the flash drive on my desk. For the next 3 hours, the city narrowed to numbers and threats. The Bellucci organization controlled several freight yards near the Indiana line. We controlled the contracts that moved goods through them. Their younger men wanted war because war gave young men a reason to feel important. I wanted an agreement. Not because I feared violence. Because violence was expensive, unpredictable, and usually managed by men who confused noise with power. The meeting took place through encrypted video. Grant sat on my right. Mason stood near the door. Natalie entered twice with updated figures and once with a handwritten note warning that one Bellucci attorney was recording from a second device. I changed the terms without looking at her. She removed the note and left. That was how we worked. She saw the threat. I moved the piece. Neither of us needed to speak. By noon, the Bellucci's had agreed to a temporary division of routes. By 1, 2 of my captains were angry enough to consider it weakness. By 2, a truck had vanished near Joliet. Every problem arrived wearing the face of urgency. Natalie's warning sat inside a black flash drive less than 3 feet from my hand. I did not touch it. At 3:15, she entered with a plate of food. I did not order lunch. That is why it is here. I am not hungry. You have had coffee and half a glass of water since 6. I had breakfast. You ate 2 bites of toast. I looked up. How do you know that you left the rest in the car? She placed the plate on my desk. Chicken, rice, vegetables. Nothing heavy. Nothing that would slow me down. You should eat. You should stop monitoring my meals. I will add it to my list. What list things I am expected to manage without appearing to manage them? I almost smiled. Almost. She turned toward the door. Natalie. She stopped. I glanced at the flash drive. Did you eat? Her expression softened. A sandwich. That is not an answer. It is exactly an answer. From where? The kitchen downstairs. What kind? She stared at me. Are you interrogating my lunch? I'm asking a question. Turkey. Any vegetables, Adrian? The way she said my name changed the room. Not because it was intimate. Because it sounded tired. I leaned back. What? She looked at the flash drive. I need you to take this seriously. I do. No. You believe Mason will handle it because that keeps it away from your desk. Mason runs security, and someone forged his authorization. He knows. Someone used a key card that should not exist. He knows. Someone accessed the archive floor where we keep internal shipping records, property transfers, and private account histories. I know what we keep there. Then why are you acting as though this is routine? Because panic makes people careless. I am not panicking. No. I studied her. You are afraid. Natalie's eyes shifted toward the windows. It was the first honest sign she had given me. What happened? Nothing. That is not true. She looked back at me. The man from the archive floor was near the garage this morning. Did he approach you? No. Did he speak to you? No. Then what did he do? He watched me. I reached for the phone. Why did you not tell Mason I did? What did he say? He assigned someone to check the garage. Then you are protected. Natalie did not answer. I heard how empty the sentence sounded only much later. At the time, it sounded like fact. She looked at the plate in front of me. Eat before it gets cold. Then she walked out. After she left, I opened the folder again. I read the payment summaries. The shell company had received more than $800,000 over 14 months. The invoices were divided into amounts small enough to avoid automatic review. Someone had approved them from an executive account. The signature belonged to Grant. That did not mean Grant had seen them. His office authorized hundreds of payments a month. Assistants used his digital credentials. Finance managers processed routine expenses beneath his approval threshold. There were explanations. There were always explanations. I told myself I would ask him after the next call. The next call became a meeting. The meeting became an argument. The argument became another missing truck. At 6:30, the office began to empty. At 7, the rain turned to sleet. Natalie was still at her desk. I saw her through the glass wall reading the same page twice. She rubbed the inside of her wrist. Then she looked toward the hallway. No one was there. She returned to the page. A minute later, she looked again. I stood. Before I reached the door, Grant entered through the private corridor. "We have a problem with Bellucci." "When do we not?" "Their eldest son wants the Indiana routes excluded from the agreement." "We already settled that." "He claims his father exceeded his authority." "His father is the authority. Not for long if the son has support." Grant placed a folder in front of me. I looked past him toward Natalie's desk. She had disappeared. "Where is she?" Grant turned. "Who?" "Natalie." "She was here a moment ago." I walked into the hall. Her chair was empty. Her coat was gone. The junior assistant had left. I checked the reception area, then the conference room. Nothing. I returned to my office. She probably went downstairs. Grant watched me with mild curiosity. "You have become very attentive." I ignored him. My phone lit with a message from Natalie. "I am checking something in the archive. Do not leave without speaking to me." I read it twice. Grant set another document on the desk. "The Belluccis want an answer within the hour. They can wait. Adrian, they can wait." Grant's eyes narrowed. For a moment, something colder than irritation crossed his face. Then it was gone. Of course. He left. I called Natalie. No answer. I called again. Her phone rang somewhere outside the office. I followed the sound to her desk. The phone lay beneath a stack of papers. She had gone to the archive floor without it. That was unlike her. Natalie carried her phone everywhere, including conference rooms 20 feet from her desk. I looked at the elevator. The floor indicator moved from 39 to 40, then stopped. I pressed the call button. The doors opened after several seconds. Empty. I stepped inside and selected 39. The archive floor smelled of paper dust and cold air from the ventilation system. Half the lights were off. Rows of locked storage cabinets disappeared into shadow. Natalie. No answer. I moved deeper into the room. A ladder stood beneath one of the cameras near the service elevator. A tool case sat open on the floor. Inside were screwdrivers, wire cutters, and 3 blank security cards. I drew my gun. Natalie. A sound came from behind the shelving. I rounded the corner. She stood near the records room, one hand pressed against her chest. Her face had lost color. My weapon lowered. What happened? She looked past me toward the elevator. He was here. The maintenance worker. Yes. Where did he go? Service stairs. I took out my phone and called Mason. Lock the building. No one leaves. Natalie crouched and picked something up from the floor. A small electronic device. What is it? I asked. A card reader. The device had been attached beneath the archive terminal. Someone had been copying access data. Mason answered. I gave him the order and the location. Natalie stared at the device in her hand. He knew I would come here. How I asked Lakefront to confirm the work order. Who else knew Mason? You, Grant. The 3 names settled between us. I heard footsteps near the elevator. Mason appeared with 2 security officers. He took the card reader from Natalie and swore under his breath. How long has this been here? I do not know, she said. Mason examined the wiring. Long enough. I looked at Natalie. You are not leaving alone. I can take a car. You are taking 2 guards. That will attract attention. You already have attention. Her mouth tightened. I need to show you something else, not here. Adrian, back upstairs. For once, she did not argue. We returned to the executive floor. Mason stationed guards near both elevator banks and ordered a sweep of the garage. Natalie walked into my office and closed the door. She did not sit. She removed a folded sheet of paper from inside her folder and placed it in front of me. It was a list of company names. Lakefront Mechanical appeared at the top. Beneath it were 4 others. All of them had received payments from Cross Consolidated. All of them shared the same registered agent, Grant Holloway. I read the page. How did you find this? I followed the payment addresses. Why did you not give this to Mason? I was not sure who could be trusted. Mason can be trusted. The forged authorization came from his system. He did not create it. I know. Then what are you saying? I am saying someone has access to people we trust. I looked toward the closed door. Grant has worked for this family for 30 years. That does not make him innocent. It does not make him guilty. Natalie stepped closer. I heard him in the garage yesterday, doing what, speaking to someone on the phone. What did he say? He said the captains would move when the money arrived. He said you would be too focused on Bellucci to notice. I stood. You are certain it was Grant? Yes, why did you wait? I needed proof. You should have come to me. I did. The words were quiet. They landed harder than if she had shouted. I looked at the clock. 8:40. The Bellucci representatives were waiting downstairs. Grant had already called twice. Natalie placed both hands on the edge of my desk. I need 5 minutes where you are not looking at a phone, a map, or a clock. I met her eyes. She was not only afraid, she was angry. Beneath the anger was something else, something wounded. I am looking at you now. For how long? The question was not about time. I knew that. I also knew I was not ready to answer it. My phone rang. Grant's name appeared on the screen. Natalie saw it. Do not answer. He is downstairs with the Belluccis. Let him wait. If this agreement fails, men die. And if I am right, I picked up the phone. Her face changed. Not dramatically. Natalie never gave anyone the satisfaction of watching her break. She simply straightened. A wall appeared behind her eyes. I answered the call. What Grant's voice came through smooth and controlled. They are threatening to leave. Keep them there. I have been trying. I'm coming down. I ended the call. Natalie stepped back. Can it wait until morning? I asked. She looked at me as if she wanted to believe I had not said it. Then she nodded once. That depends on what happens tonight. Natalie. She gathered the papers from my desk. Good night, Mr. Cross. I disliked the title. I disliked the distance in her voice more. She walked into the hall. I followed her to the elevator. Natalie, take the guards. They are sweeping the garage. Wait for them. I have waited enough tonight. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. I placed one hand against the door before it could close. For 1 second we stood there with the city reflected in the dark glass around us. I wanted to tell her not to go. I wanted to ask what she had meant when she said I was not watching everything. I wanted to say that I noticed when she entered a room, that I knew the exact sound of her footsteps in the hall, that I had memorized the way she pressed her lips together when she thought I was making a mistake. Instead, I said, "Call me when you get home." She gave me a tired smile. You do not answer when I call. The doors closed. I stood there for another second. Then Grant called again. By the time I reached the private dining room, the Bellucci men were already on their feet. Voices rose over untouched glasses of bourbon. Grant stood near the window, calm as stone, speaking as if nothing inside our building had changed. For the next hour, I fought to keep peace between men who had spent most of their lives profiting from war. At 10:12, the agreement was signed. At 10:15, I returned to my office. Natalie's desk was empty. The lights were off. Her coffee cup sat near the keyboard, half full and cold. I checked my phone. No call, no message. I told myself she had driven home. I told myself she was angry. I told myself I would speak to her in the morning. Far below the tower in the underground garage, a white maintenance van waited across 2 parking spaces. Natalie stood beside her car with one hand inside her bag. The man from the archive floor stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. Another figure approached from the service corridor. She reached for the alarm Mason had given her. A familiar voice stopped her. Do not make this harder than it has to be. Natalie turned toward the man she had trusted to protect Adrian since he was a boy. The man waiting in the garage was Grant Holloway. I did not know that when Natalie turned toward him. I did not know he had already paid 2 of my security officers to disable the cameras. I did not know the maintenance worker behind the pillar carried a syringe in his coat. I did not know Natalie managed to press the alarm inside her bag before someone caught her wrist. I only knew that when I arrived the next morning, her desk was empty. At 7:30, the executive floor was dark. That should have been enough. Natalie always arrived before the city seemed awake. By the time I stepped from the elevator, the lights were on. The overnight reports were waiting, and coffee sat on my desk at exactly the temperature I preferred. That morning there was nothing. No coffee, no revised schedule, no quiet movement behind the glass wall. The orchid near reception leaned toward the window again. A junior assistant hurried from the copy room when she heard the elevator. Her name was Emily. She had worked for us for 3 months and still looked frightened whenever I addressed her directly. "Where is Natalie?" Emily stopped. "She called in sick. When early this morning." "Who did she speak to?" Emily opened her mouth, then closed it. "I assumed she spoke to you. I am asking who received the call." Her eyes moved toward the empty reception desk. "I do not know." Mason stepped from the elevator behind me. He looked at Natalie's desk, then at me. "She did not call me." I took out my phone. My message from the previous night still showed no reply. "Call me when you get home." I called her. The line went directly to voicemail. I waited for the tone. "Natalie, call me." I ended the message. Emily remained near the copy room. "Did she say she was ill?" "No, sir. Someone left a note in the scheduling system." "Show me." She hurried to her computer and opened the record. At 6:12 that morning, Natalie's account had posted a short message. "Out sick. Cancel morning briefings." Nothing else. No instructions. No changes to the afternoon schedule. No information about the Bellucci agreement. Natalie would have left more detail if she had been taken to a hospital unconscious. I looked toward her office. Her coat hung behind the door. A line of melted snow had dried beneath it. Mason saw it too. She did not leave wearing that. It was freezing last night. I know. I walked into her office. The room smelled faintly of coffee and the lavender hand cream she kept beside the keyboard. Everything appeared organized. Folders stood in neat rows. Pens were arranged in a ceramic cup. A yellow legal pad rested beside the phone. The order felt wrong. Natalie's desk was never simply clean. It was active. There was always a list open, a document waiting for a signature, or a note placed where she knew I would see it. This desk looked abandoned. I opened the top drawer. Her apartment keys were inside. So was a small bottle of prescription medication with her name printed on the label. Mason moved closer. "What is that migraine medication? How often does she need it, once or twice a month?" He looked at me. "You know that. She gets quiet before the pain starts." I closed the drawer too hard. Her handbag sat beneath the desk. Her wallet was inside. So was the portable charger she carried everywhere. One of her shoes had a deep scrape along the heel. I picked it up. The mark exposed pale leather beneath the black finish. Mason crouched near the chair. There, a silver button lay beneath the desk. It matched the buttons on Natalie's winter coat. I held it in my palm. Something cold moved through my chest. "Lock the building." Mason stood, already doing it. No one leaves. Not executives, not staff, not contractors. What about Grant? What about him? He left 30 minutes ago. I looked at Mason. Why, he said he had a meeting in Oak Brook. Find him. Mason turned toward the door. "And pull every security recording from last night," I said. "The garage, the lobby, the elevators, the streets outside." He nodded and left. I called Natalie again. Voicemail. My second message was shorter. "This is not a request." I walked into my office and stared at the black flash drive on my desk. It sat exactly where she had placed it the day before. In case tomorrow is too late. I inserted it into my computer. The first folder contained invoices from Lakefront Mechanical. The second contained access records. The third held images of forged work orders. Then I found a file labeled personal. It required a password. I tried her employee number. Incorrect. I tried Daniel's birthday, which I found in her personnel records. Incorrect. I looked through the glass wall at her empty chair. Then I entered the time she arrived every morning. 7:15. The folder opened. Inside was a document with 5 words. "If I disappear, look home." Below it was a list of company names, account numbers, and properties connected to shell corporations. One address appeared 3 times. A maintenance shop on South Racine Avenue. Mason returned 20 minutes later with a laptop under one arm. His face told me he had found something. "We have a problem. Show me." He placed the computer on my desk. The garage footage began at 8:30 the previous evening. Natalie exited the elevator at 8:47. She crossed the concrete floor toward her car. Then, the picture broke into gray static. The recording jumped forward 15 minutes. When the image returned, her parking space was empty. What happened to the feed? Someone entered a maintenance command from my account. Were you logged in? No. Could someone have used your terminal? My office was locked. Keys. 3 people have emergency access. Names. You, Natalie, Grant. I looked at him. Grant left the building before 8, according to his keycard. What did the cameras show? Mason changed the recording. Grant entered the private elevator at 7:56. The doors closed. There was no image of him reaching the lobby, no image of him entering the garage. Nothing showed him leaving the building. He used the private corridor, Mason said. The corridor connected the executive offices to a service elevator that descended directly to the garage. It had no public camera. My father had designed it for discreet exits. Grant knew that. Tracked Natalie's car. Mason opened another screen. Traffic cameras showed her car leaving the garage at 9:14. It traveled northwest for 12 minutes, then disappeared near the Kennedy Expressway. Was she driving? The angle is too dark. Find the car. I have teams looking. I called Grant. He answered after the 4th ring. Adrian, where are you, Oakbrook? Come back. I am about to enter a meeting. Cancel it. A pause. What happened? Natalie is missing. Grant's voice softened in a way that sounded practiced. Missing her car left the garage after the cameras were disabled. That is concerning. Your keycard shows you left the executive floor, but no camera shows you leaving the building. Silence. Then Grant exhaled. Are you accusing me? I am telling you to return. I have served your family for 30 years. That was not an answer. I used the private corridor. I met a driver in the service garage. Which driver? Thomas Vale. Have him call Mason. Another pause. Of course. The call ended. Mason was already searching the employee system. There is no Thomas Vale. I looked at Grant's name on my screen. Find him. Mason left again. I returned to Natalie's office. This time I searched everything. I removed the drawers and checked beneath them. I opened every folder, examined every envelope, and emptied her handbag onto the desk. Lip balm, a small notebook, a phone charger, receipts, a wrapped peppermint, a photograph of Natalie and Daniel standing beside Lake Michigan. She was laughing. Her head was turned away from the camera. Wind had blown her hair across her face. Daniel held one arm around her shoulders. I had never seen her laugh like that, not in 6 years. At work, her smiles were controlled. Her amusement appeared in her eyes before she allowed it to reach her mouth. The woman in the photograph looked free. I turned it over. Daniel had written a date and a message, for the day you finally take a vacation. I placed the photograph back on the desk. Beneath the frame, a thin strip of paper extended from the bottom drawer. I pulled it free. It was a printed list of maintenance payments. Several lines were circled. Beside them, Natalie had written a note. Grant approved all 5 companies. Same registered agent. Check old Cross properties. I read it twice. Then I called Mason. Stop looking only at active company sites. Check every property we sold or closed in the past 5 years. Why? Because Natalie told us to look home. While Mason worked, I went to her apartment. It was on the 3rd floor of a brick building in Lincoln Park. Natalie had given me a spare key 2 years earlier after a water leak damaged the unit below hers. She had said it was for emergencies. I had never used it. The apartment was quiet. A cup of tea sat on the kitchen counter. A pale ring had dried around the inside. A book lay open on the couch. Her reading glasses rested across the page. There was no sign of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no broken lock. She had not come home. Mason checked the bedroom while I moved through the kitchen. A note was attached to the refrigerator. Buy Adrian's coffee. I stared at the handwriting. Even here inside the private life, I rarely considered I occupied space. Mason entered behind me. She packed nothing. I opened a cabinet. Her passport was inside, so she did not leave. No, she would not have left without her medication or keys. No, she would not have ignored work. No. Each answer pushed the same truth deeper. Someone had taken her from my building. I looked around the apartment. There were no expensive decorations, no photographs of parties, no evidence of the life people imagined she had because she worked for me. Her home was quiet, practical, carefully maintained. A calendar hung near the kitchen. Most of the dates were filled with work notes. One Saturday had been circled in blue. Milwaukee, Daniel. She was visiting her brother, I said. Mason looked at the date. This weekend. In the bedroom closet, I found a wrapped gift on the upper shelf. Daniel's name was written across the top. Natalie did not leave unfinished promises. I called him. He answered with the impatient voice of someone expecting his sister. Natalie, this is Adrian Cross. Silence. Then his tone hardened. Why do you have her phone? I do not. Then why are you calling? When did you last speak to her? Yesterday afternoon. What did she say? That she was busy? Did she sound afraid? Another silence. Yes. I closed my eyes. What exactly did she say? She asked whether I remembered the lake house our parents rented when we were children. Why, I do not know. She said if she missed Saturday, I should not wait for her. Did she mention Grant Holloway number lakefront mechanical nor Daniel's breathing changed? What happened? We cannot locate her. You lost my sister. She disappeared after leaving work. She worked inside a building filled with armed men. I know. You knew people wanted you dead and you let her stand beside you every day. My hand tightened around the phone. Daniel, no, you listen to me. She gave that company 6 years. She missed birthdays, dinners, everything. She said it mattered because you depended on her. I do. That is not the same as protecting her. I had no answer. He heard it. I am coming to Chicago. Stay where you are. You do not give me orders. If Natalie was taken because of something she discovered, anyone close to her could be in danger. She is my sister, and keeping you alive may be the last thing she tried to do. The line went quiet. When Daniel spoke again, his anger had not disappeared. It had narrowed. Find her. The call ended. Mason stood near the bedroom door. We found the car. It had been abandoned beneath an overpass near the Kennedy Expressway. The driver's door was unlocked. Natalie's phone lay broken on the passenger seat. There was blood on the steering wheel. I reached the scene before the police unit Mason trusted. Snow collected along the windshield. One of our men opened the trunk. Empty. Mason examined the blood. Not much. It is hers. We do not know that. I do. He looked at me. The blood was a message. Enough to frighten us. Not enough to explain anything. A burner phone rang inside the glove compartment. Mason drew his weapon. I answered. For several seconds, there was only breathing. Then a distorted voice spoke. Complete the Bellucci agreement. It is already complete. Keep it that way. Let me hear Natalie. A faint sound played through the phone. A woman breathing. Slow, uneven. It could have been a recording. It could have been her. Where is she? Stop looking at the accounts. Grant. The voice did not respond. You wanted my attention. You have it. A soft laugh came through the distortion. No, Adrian, she wanted your attention. The call ended. I stood beneath the overpass with freezing water dripping from the concrete above me. Mason took the phone and placed it in an evidence bag. They are trying to move you. They already did. We're away from the accounts, toward Bellucci. They want a war, yes. I looked at Natalie's blood on the steering wheel. Grant thinks I will attack the Belluccis before I examine my own house. Mason's eyes hardened. Will you know? We returned to Cross Consolidated near midnight. 4 people waited in the conference room. Mason had chosen them personally. Caroline Webb from legal, Isaac Cole from internal finance, Victor Shaw, one of our oldest captains, Ethan Brooks from digital security. I collected their phones and placed them in a locked metal case. Victor objected. I have men in the field, so do I. What is this? I placed Natalie's silver button on the table. Someone entered my building, disabled my cameras, copied our security records, and took her from the garage. Caroline stared at the button. Have you contacted federal authorities? Not yet. Victor leaned back. You think one of us is involved. I think someone inside this organization gave them access. That is not the same thing. It is close enough. Isaac opened the financial files from Natalie's drive. The room fell silent as the shell companies appeared on the screen. Payments stretched across 14 months. Some were small, others exceeded $100,000. All had passed through departments Grant controlled. Ethan examined the security records. These commands came from inside the building. Can you identify the terminal? I asked. The system says Mason's office. Mason stood behind him. It was not. Ethan looked uncomfortable. I believe you. I do not need belief. I need proof. Caroline studied the company names. Lakefront Mechanical owns a repair shop on South Racine. We are going there now. Victor stood. I will bring men. No, he frowned. Why not? Because I do not know which of your men Grant purchased. The room went still. Victor's face darkened. You are making a dangerous accusation. Then help me prove it false. The repair shop was empty when we arrived. The front door had been forced recently. Inside, the air smelled of oil and bleach. A metal chair sat in the center of the floor. Natalie's broken phone lay beside it. Blood marked the concrete. I crossed the room before Mason could stop me. There were no restraints, no signs of prolonged confinement. The blood remained wet despite the cold building. Mason touched the edge with a gloved finger. This was placed here recently. A staged scene. Yes. A sound came from the office. One of our men raised his weapon. It was only an old computer restarting. On the screen, a map of Chicago appeared. One address was marked in red, a warehouse near Calumet City. Victor looked at me. There. No. He frowned. What do you mean it is too easy? They left the address because they want us to find her. They left it because they want us to lose time. I looked around the repair shop. Natalie had found the shell companies by following addresses. Grant knew we would do the same. He had built a trail designed to be discovered. I returned to headquarters before dawn. The search teams found nothing at the Calumet warehouse except an empty room and another broken camera. 40 hours had passed since Natalie disappeared. I sat at her desk. For the first time, I opened her daily notebook without searching for evidence. The pages contained reminders written in her clean, narrow handwriting. Call Mrs. Ruiz about her husband's medical payment. Move Andrew's shift so he can attend his daughter's surgery. Do not schedule Adrian near the west windows during the protest. Remind Mason about his allergy medication. Ask finance why the injured driver's pension was delayed. Each note was small. Together they formed a map of the lives surrounding me. I had believed Natalie managed my time. She had been managing the human cost of my decisions. The elevator opened. Daniel walked onto the floor wearing a dark jacket over hospital scrubs. He crossed the office before security could stop him and grabbed the front of my shirt. You knew men wanted you dead. Mason moved forward. I raised one hand. He stopped. Daniel's eyes were red from the drive. You let my sister stand beside you every day. I know. How long? I did not answer. How many hours was she gone before you noticed? I looked at the clock above Natalie's desk. 41 hours. Too many meetings. Too many calls. Too many moments when I assumed she would appear and place order back into my life. Too many, I said. Daniel released my shirt with disgust. Mason's phone rang. He answered, listened, then looked at me. We traced the white van. Where it passed 3 city cameras before disappearing near back of the yards. He placed a property record on Natalie's desk, an abandoned cold storage warehouse. The building had belonged to my father. Grant had approved its sale 2 years earlier. The sale had never closed. Natalie's words returned to me. Look home. I reached beneath my coat and checked the pistol at my side. Outside, morning rain struck the black windows of Cross Consolidated. I looked once at Natalie's empty chair. Then I walked towards the elevator. The elevator doors closed behind me. Daniel remained beside Natalie's empty desk, his hands clenched at his sides. Mason stepped into the elevator before the doors sealed. Neither of us spoke as we descended. There was nothing left to say. For 41 hours I had searched reports, cameras, accounts, and properties while Natalie waited somewhere in the dark. Every minute had been counted by people who understood exactly what her absence would do to me. Grant had not taken her only because she found his money. He had taken her because he knew I would tear apart my own empire trying to bring her back. He was right. The private garage was filled with men when we arrived. 6 black vehicles waited with their engines running. Rainwater rolled across the concrete beneath their tires. Mason opened the rear door of the first vehicle. How many men do you want inside for? We have 12 ready. 12 men make noise. We may need noise. If Grant wants us at that warehouse, he will be watching the roads. Mason looked toward the security team. You think it is another false location? I think it is real. Why? Because the false locations were meant to delay us. This one was meant to remain forgotten. The warehouse had once been part of Cross Cold Storage, one of the first legitimate businesses my grandfather purchased. Meat medicine and stolen liquor had all passed through its loading bays. My father closed it when the refrigeration system failed, and the city began inspecting the property too closely. Grant managed the sale. The buyer existed only on paper. The title still belonged to us. Look home, Natalie had known. I should have known too. Mason selected 4 men he trusted. Each had worked directly under him for more than a decade. Their weapons and phones were checked before they entered the vehicles. I opened the front passenger door. Mason stopped me. "You should stay behind the second car. I am going inside first. You are the head of the family. Natalie did not spend 2 nights in a basement because I know how to remain safe. That does not mean you walk into an ambush. It means I stop asking other people to enter rooms I am unwilling to enter myself." Mason stared at me for a moment, then handed me a radio. We left River North before sunrise. The city looked colorless beneath the storm. Rain struck the windshield and blurred the lights along the river. The elevated train passed above us with a roar, carrying people toward ordinary mornings. Somewhere a man was buying coffee before work. A woman was waking her children. Someone was complaining about traffic. Natalie should have been at her desk. She should have been correcting my schedule and pretending not to notice when I watched her from behind the glass. Instead, she was inside a building my family had abandoned. The thought sat beneath my ribs like a blade. We crossed into back of the yards as the sky began to lighten. The old industrial district stretched around us in brick walls, rusted fences, and smokestacks that had not produced anything in years. Empty rail lines cut through the neighborhood. We passed warehouses with broken windows and faded company names painted across their sides. Mason pointed through the windshield. There. The cold storage facility stood behind a chain fence near the rail yard. 3 stories of stained brick rose above a loading dock. Several windows were boarded. A rusted sign hung over the entrance, one corner moving in the wind. Cross Cold Storage. The final letters had faded almost completely. We stopped 2 blocks away. One vehicle continued past the property, then turned near the railroad crossing. Another team approached from the rear. Mason studied the building through binoculars. No visible movement. "They know we are here. You cannot know that. Grant never leaves a room unwatched." I checked my pistol. The metal felt cold in my hand. Mason lowered the binoculars. "Adrian." I looked at him. "If we find Grant first, do not lose sight of why we came." I almost told him he did not need to remind me. Then I remembered Natalie standing in my office asking for 5 minutes. "I know why we came." We moved through a gap cut into the fence. The loading yard smelled of wet brick and standing water. A white maintenance van stood near a side entrance, the same model captured by the traffic cameras. One rear door was open. Mason raised his fist. The team stopped. He approached the vehicle from the left while I moved along the right side. The cargo area was empty except for plastic restraints, a blanket, and an uncapped syringe. A dark strand of hair clung to the fabric. I reached for it. Mason caught my wrist. "Do not touch anything." I looked at his hand until he released me. The loading door ahead stood open by several inches. A metal chain moved against the frame. Someone had left it that way. We entered. The warehouse swallowed the sound of the rain. Rows of old refrigeration units filled the ground floor. Pipes crossed the ceiling. Water dripped into metal trays below. The air carried the smell of mildew oil and something sharper beneath it. Fuel. Mason noticed it too. His hand moved toward the radio. Before he could speak, a gunshot cracked from the upper walkway. The man behind us dropped. A second shot struck the concrete beside my foot. Cover. We moved behind a refrigeration unit as bullets tore through the rusted metal. The sound rolled through the building. Mason fired towards the walkway. One of our men pulled the wounded guard behind cover. Blood spread across his shoulder, but he remained conscious. "How many?" I asked. "At least 3 above us," Mason said. Another weapon fired from the loading bay, 2 behind. The ambush closed around us. Grant had chosen the building well. Narrow passages, high positions, few exits. He had learned from my father. So had I. I looked at the pipes running above the refrigeration units. The old system had maintenance ladders built into the walls. I pointed toward the far side. Mason understood. He fired twice toward the upper walkway while I crossed the open floor. A bullet struck the unit beside my head. Metal fragments cut my cheek. I reached the wall, climbed the ladder, and pulled myself onto a narrow service platform. One of Grant's men turned toward me. He wore a cross-security ring. Not an outsider, one of mine. For a moment his eyes widened. I fired first. He fell against the railing and dropped his weapon. Another man rushed from the shadows. He swung the barrel of his gun toward me. I caught his wrist, drove it against the rail, and heard the bone break. He shouted. I pulled him forward and struck him once across the throat. He collapsed to his knees. I pressed my pistol beneath his jaw. "Where is she?" He stared at me, breathing hard. Basement. Where north stairwell. Grant. A smile appeared through the pane. Gone. When maybe an hour. Where did he go? He did not tell us. I pushed the weapon harder against his skin. He told you something. The man laughed. He said you would chase him. Below us, Mason fired again. The man's smile widened. He said you would choose the Empire. I struck him with the pistol and left him unconscious on the platform. The gunfire near the loading bay stopped. One of Mason's men called that the rear attackers were down. I descended the ladder. Mason met me near the center aisle. Grant left. I know. There are fresh tire tracks behind the building. We can still catch him. Where is the north stairwell? He pointed toward a dark corridor beyond the refrigeration units. Before we moved, an engine started outside. One of our men shouted through the radio. Black sedan leaving east side. Mason turned toward the loading door. That is Grant. I listened. Beneath the rain and the fading engine, another sound moved through the building. A dull impact, then silence. It came from below. Mason heard it. His eyes returned to mine. We can send men downstairs. No, Adrian, if Grant reaches the highway, we lose him, then follow him. He stared at me. What about you? I am staying. Do not do this alone. I am not leaving her for Grant. The choice settled between us. Mason had spent years watching me protect territory money and reputation before anything else. He had watched me answer every wound with force. He looked toward the loading bay, then toward the basement corridor. Finally, he handed me a flashlight. 2 men stay with you. No, take everyone who can move. Adrian, catch him. Mason held my gaze, then he nodded. He left through the loading bay with 3 men. The wounded guard remained near the entrance with one of our medics. I moved into the north corridor alone. The temperature dropped with every step. Old insulated doors lined the walls. Some stood open, revealing empty storage rooms. Others had been welded shut. The flashlight beam shook across cracked tiles and rusted pipes. I told myself the movement came from my breathing. At the end of the corridor, a concrete staircase descended beneath the warehouse. A steel door blocked the bottom. A chain had been wrapped around the handle and secured with a heavy lock. I raised my pistol and fired. The bullet struck the lock and threw sparks across the wall. The chain remained intact. I fired again. The metal bent but did not break. Smoke began moving along the ceiling behind me. Grant's men had prepared more than an ambush. The fuel smell was stronger here. He intended to burn the building. I placed the flashlight on the floor and drove my shoulder against the door. Pain shot through my arm. The frame groaned. I struck it again. Nothing. The smoke thickened. Natalie, no answer. I stepped back and hit the door a 3rd time. The chain pulled part of the frame loose. A faint sound came from the other side. Not a word. A scrape against concrete. I hit the door again. The lock tore free. The door crashed inward. Cold air rose from the basement. I took the flashlight and descended. The stairs were wet. Each footstep echoed through the space below. Natalie. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. I reached the bottom. The flashlight passed over rusted shelves, broken crates, and an overturned chair. A plastic bottle lay against the wall. Then the beam found scratches in the concrete, 6 short marks. A 7th line had been started but not finished. Beside them, 2 words had been written in dark, dried blood. Look home. My light moved farther across the room. Natalie sat beneath a boarded window. Her wrists were secured in front of her with plastic ties. Her right hand was swollen and discolored. One sleeve of her blouse had been torn. Her bare feet rested against the freezing floor. Her head hung forward. For 1 second I could not move. The world narrowed to the distance between us. I had seen bodies in alleys, cars, warehouses, and hotel rooms. I had watched men die while trying to speak. I had stood beside my father's open grave without allowing my hands to shake. Nothing prepared me for the stillness of Natalie's body. I dropped the pistol. Natalie. I crossed the room and fell to my knees. My hand touched her cheek. Her skin was colder than the basement wall. No. I pressed 2 fingers against her throat. There was a pulse, weak, uneven, but present. Natalie, open your eyes. Her lips moved. No sound came out. I leaned closer. Her breath touched my cheek. Adrian, I am here. Her eyelids lifted slightly. She tried to focus on my face. You took your time. The words barely existed, but they were hers. I lowered my forehead to hers for 1 second. I know. I removed a knife from my pocket and cut the restraints around her wrists. Her right hand fell against my chest. She gasped. I am sorry, stop saying that. Her voice was thin. Save it for when I can argue. Smoke began entering through the stairwell. I slid one arm behind her shoulders and the other beneath her knees. She tensed when I lifted her. What did they give you? I do not know. How long since you had water? She closed her eyes. Yesterday. Maybe. The answer was not reliable. She had lost track of time. I carried her toward the stairs. Her left hand caught the front of my coat. Grant. Mason is following him. Her fingers tightened weakly. He knows you found me. How he planned the fire. A low mechanical click came from the wall. Then another. The old ventilation system started somewhere above us. Smoke poured through the basement vent. Grant had left the building prepared to finish the job after we entered. Natalie looked toward the ceiling. Fuel near the boiler. How much enough? A sharp sound rolled through the floor. Glass breaking. Then fire breathed inside the corridor above us. I started up the stairs. Natalie's head rested against my shoulder. Adrian, do not speak. He was not stealing from you. I know, no. She forced her eyes open. He was buying them. The captains, the drivers, the security officers. Grant had not been building a private fortune. He had been purchasing my organization one man at a time. The upper corridor was filled with smoke. Flames moved along the wall where fuel had been poured beneath the pipes. I covered Natalie's face with the front of my coat and moved through it. Heat struck my skin. A section of ceiling fell behind us. The main loading floor was barely visible. I followed the sound of rain toward the entrance. A burning support beam collapsed across the path. I turned toward the rear corridor. The old building map returned to me. Cold storage facilities required emergency loading doors near the railside. My father had once shown me one when I was a child. I moved through the smoke, carrying Natalie between rusted refrigeration units. Her body became heavier. Natalie. No answer. Stay awake. Her left hand moved faintly against my coat. I found the emergency door behind a hanging plastic curtain. It was secured from the inside by a horizontal bar. I kicked it once. The door opened into the storm. Cold rain struck us. I carried her onto the loading platform and down the steps. A medical vehicle entered the yard as Mason's wounded guard signaled from the gate. Dr. Rebecca Shaw jumped from the rear before it stopped moving. I lowered Natalie onto the wet pavement. Rebecca pressed 2 fingers to her neck. Move back. She stopped answering. Move back, Adrian. I did not. Rebecca looked up. If you want her alive, get out of my way. I stepped back. The medical team cut away Natalie's sleeve and wrapped thermal blankets around her. One medic prepared an oxygen mask. Another searched for a vein. Rebecca examined Natalie's swollen hand. Her expression tightened. How long was she restrained? I do not know. How long was she missing 41 hours? Rebecca looked at me. That is not what I asked. I do not know. Natalie's chest stopped moving. Everything inside me went silent. Rebecca began compressions. The medic forced air into Natalie's lungs. Once, twice, 3 times. Rain ran into my eyes. I did not wipe it away. The warehouse burned behind them, flames rising through broken windows. Sirens approached from the street. Rebecca pressed her fingers against Natalie's throat again. Come on. Several seconds passed. Natalie coughed beneath the oxygen mask. Her body twisted weakly. The medic steadied her. Rebecca released one breath. We have her. I turned away before anyone could see what moved across my face. The loading yard blurred. Mason's vehicle returned through the gate without the black sedan. He stepped out and saw Natalie on the pavement. Grant abandoned the car near the interstate. I looked at him. He escaped for now. Rebecca approached me while the medics lifted Natalie onto a stretcher. She has severe hypothermia dehydration and likely sedatives in her system. Her right wrist has been compressed for too long. What does that mean, nerve damage? Temporary. I cannot promise that. I looked at Natalie's hand. The same hand that had placed files in front of me. The same hand that had pushed a flash drive across my desk. The same hand I had watched disappear behind the elevator doors. Rebecca followed my gaze. If you had reached her yesterday, I would be more optimistic. The words entered slowly. If I had reached her yesterday, she is alive. Focus on that. Alive was not the same as unharmed. Found was not the same as saved. The medics pushed the stretcher toward the vehicle. Natalie's eyes opened for a moment. I moved beside her. Her gaze found me through the rain. "Do not let him turn you into your father." Then her eyes closed. The rear doors shut between us. I stood in the burning yard as the ambulance carried her away. For most of my life, men had believed Adrian Cross was never too late. They were wrong. I had reached the basement before the fire consumed it. I had reached Natalie before her heart stopped completely. But I had arrived after the cold, after the restraints, after the fear, and after she had spent 41 hours wondering whether I would ever notice she was gone. Mason approached with a folder taken from Grant's abandoned car. Inside were photographs of Natalie leaving work, entering her apartment, buying coffee, and visiting her brother. The surveillance stretched across several months. On the final photograph, Grant had written a message in black ink. She was never the target. She was the lock. I closed the folder and looked toward the road where the ambulance had disappeared. Grant had believed taking Natalie would open every violent part of me he needed. He had known exactly where to place the blade. What he had not understood was that Natalie's final warning had already changed the direction of my hand. The ambulance doors closed before I could answer her. "Do not let him turn you into your father." Natalie had been barely conscious, her body cold enough to stop her heart, yet she had still used what little strength remained to warn me. Not about Grant. About myself. I followed the ambulance through Chicago with Mason driving. Rain blurred the red lights ahead of us. The city moved around our vehicles as though nothing had happened. Trains crossed above the streets. Delivery trucks pulled away from loading docks. Office windows began glowing one floor at a time. Natalie should have been inside one of those towers holding a cup of coffee and telling me I had scheduled too many meetings. Instead, her blood had dried across my shirt. Mason gripped the wheel. "Grant crossed into Indiana before we reached the interstate. He will not leave the country." "You sound certain. He spent 30 years building influence in Chicago. Men like Grant do not abandon power. They hide close enough to believe they still control it." Mason glanced at me. "We have people checking airports, train stations, and private fields. No public search. You think someone will warn him? I know someone will." The folder from Grant's car rested on my lap. Photographs of Natalie filled it. She was walking from her apartment, leaving a grocery store, standing outside Cross Consolidated, sitting across from Daniel in a Milwaukee restaurant. One image showed her asleep in the back seat of a company car, her head against the window after a 16-hour day. Someone had been watching her for months. I had been 10 feet away and had seen nothing. At the hospital, Rebecca met us near the emergency entrance. Her hair was tied back. Rain darkened the shoulders of her coat. "They are taking Natalie into surgery, for her hand, for several things. Her body temperature is rising but slowly. She has a concussion, 2 cracked ribs, and signs of chemical sedation. Will she wake up? I do not know." The answer came without softness. Rebecca had treated men from my family for 15 years. She understood that lies offered comfort only until the truth arrived. What about her hand? The restraint compressed the nerves and reduced circulation. "We will release the pressure and repair what we can. What happens after we wait? I do not wait. You do now." She walked through the secured doors. I stood in the corridor with rainwater collecting beneath my shoes. Mason remained several feet away. Neither of us spoke. There were problems I could solve with money pressure or violence. There were doors I could force open and men I could make disappear. Nothing I possessed could make Natalie wake. Daniel arrived 20 minutes later wearing the same hospital scrubs he had worn to my office. He saw the blood on my shirt and stopped. "Is it hers? Yes?" His face changed. For 1 second, anger gave way to fear. "Is she alive?" "Yes. Is she going to stay that way? I do not know." He looked toward the secured doors. "What happened to her?" "They kept her in a basement. She was restrained, drugged." "How long? Almost 2 days." Daniel closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he stepped closer. "If she wakes up, you do not get to decide what she owes you." "I know." "No, you do not." His voice remained low, but each word carried more force than shouting. "You will want forgiveness because guilt is uncomfortable. You will want her back in that office because everything works better when she is there. You will call it loyalty. You will call it protection. You will tell yourself she chose it. I will not. You already did. I looked at the doors Rebecca had disappeared behind. Daniel's anger was not wrong. That made it harder to hear. She will have every choice, I said, whether she returns or never sees me again. And the medical bills covered. Her apartment covered. Rehabilitation. Anything she needs. Daniel gave a bitter laugh. You think money makes the decision clean? No, then why mention it because she should not have to remain near me to survive what happened because of me? He studied my face. Some of his anger shifted, but none of it disappeared. Good. He walked toward the waiting room. I stayed in the corridor. The surgery lasted 6 hours. During the first hour, Mason brought me the names of every employee who had accessed the executive security system during the previous month. During the second, Isaac Cole sent records showing that Grant had moved more than $14 million through shell contractors. During the third, one of our captains disappeared. By the fourth, 2 drivers admitted receiving cash in exchange for route information. By the fifth, the Bellucci family requested a meeting to deny involvement. By the sixth, I understood what Grant had built. It was not theft. It was succession. He had purchased drivers, security officers, accountants, and regional captains. He had created failures inside my organization, then used those failures to make my leadership appear weak. The false police stopped the missing truck, the copied access cards, and the pressure from the Belluccis had all been parts of the same design. Grant wanted me angry. Angry men become predictable. He expected me to blame the Belluccis, start a war, and force my own captains to choose between chaos under me and stability under him. Natalie had found the payments before the final stage. That was why he took her. Not simply to silence her. He needed to know how much she had discovered and where she had hidden it. Rebecca emerged shortly after noon. There was blood on the front of her surgical gown. I stood. She survived the surgery. The breath I released hurt. Her hand we restored circulation. The nerves are damaged but not destroyed. Will she regain movement some? Perhaps most. We will not know until the swelling decreases. When will she wake? That depends on her body. Hours possibly, days possibly. Rebecca removed her cap. She was strong enough to survive the basement. Do not turn that into a demand that she recover according to your schedule. I would not. She looked at me for a long moment. You have built your life around making people believe you control every outcome. I control enough, not this. No. Her expression softened slightly. She will be moved to a private room. Daniel can see her first. I nodded. Rebecca seemed surprised. I would have been too once. Daniel belonged beside her. My place had not yet been decided. For 8 days, Natalie did not wake. I sat beside her only when Daniel allowed it. The room had one large window facing east. Morning light moved slowly across the floor, touched the edge of her bed, then disappeared behind the buildings. Machines measured every breath. A white bandage covered her right hand from the fingertips to the middle of her forearm. Bruises darkened the skin beneath her eyes. A small cut crossed her lower lip. She looked smaller in the hospital bed, not weak, reduced by the room. Natalie had always seemed to occupy more space than her body required because everything around her responded to her presence. Phones stopped ringing, meetings began, people lowered their voices and listened. Now the world continued while she remained still. I conducted no business inside her room. Calls were taken in the corridor. Weapons remained with Mason outside. When executives arrived, I met them downstairs. Her room would not become another extension of Cross Consolidated. On the third night, she began moving in her sleep. Her breathing quickened. Her left hand pulled against the blanket. No. I stood beside the bed. Natalie. Her eyes remained closed. No door. I reached toward her, then stopped. I did not know whether touching her would comfort or frighten her. Daniel entered from the hallway and moved to the other side of the bed. He placed his hand near her shoulder. Nat, you are at the hospital. You are safe. Her breathing slowed. I stepped back. Daniel looked at me across the bed. She hates locked rooms. I did not know. She got trapped in a cellar when we were children. The lock jammed. She was inside for 3 hours. The knowledge struck harder than it should have. Grant might not have known. Perhaps the basement was simply convenient. The result was the same. Natalie had spent 41 hours inside a childhood fear while I negotiated contracts. She never told me. Daniel adjusted the blanket around her. Did you ever ask what she was afraid of? I looked at her bruised face. No. On the fourth day, Mason brought a box from Natalie's apartment. We searched it twice, he said. Daniel found this behind a panel in her closet. Inside were 6 black notebooks, several envelopes, and a set of financial records. I opened the first notebook in the hospital lounge. The early pages concerned schedules, security routes, and executive meetings. Her handwriting was narrow and precise. Then the entries changed. Mrs. Ruiz has not received the final payment after her husband's death. Grant's office claims the paperwork is incomplete. It is not. Andrew Cole needs Thursday morning free for his daughter's surgery. Do not ask him to explain in front of the drivers. Mason's allergy is worse in winter. Keep medication in the second reception drawer. Adrian has not slept before February 17th in 3 years. Move morning meetings later. He will refuse if asked directly. I turned the page. There were hundreds of notes. She had recorded the names of injured employees, widows, children drivers facing eviction, and assistants caring for sick parents. Beside each problem, she had written a solution. Sometimes she had placed the right document on my desk at the right moment. Sometimes she had changed the order of a meeting so that I heard the human cost before the financial argument. Sometimes she had made a decision herself and allowed others to believe it came from me. I had thought the company functioned because people feared disappointing me. It functioned because Natalie refused to let my authority crush people I had never learned to see. One entry concerned a warehouse closure in Cicero. Grant will give Adrian the numbers first. Explain that 32 employees have no transport to the replacement site. He will approve the closure unless he understands what it means before he signs. The closure had been delayed for 3 months. Transportation had been arranged. I remembered signing the approval. I had believed the solution was mine. I opened another notebook. A folder marked Adrian rested near the bottom of the box. It contained no account records, only observations. He touches his left cuff when he suspects a lie. He stops eating when he feels responsible for a threat. He watches exits because his father taught him that every room becomes dangerous when people stop paying attention. He becomes reckless when someone under his protection is hurt. He believes people remain close because they are paid, frightened, or waiting for something. On the final page, one line had been written alone. He notices every exit in a room. I wonder whether he has ever noticed when someone wants to stay. I closed the folder. Mason stood near the window. How much did she know more than either of us? About Grant, about everyone. I returned the papers to the box. No, not everyone. Mason waited. About me. The investigation moved without mercy. Natalie's records connected the shell companies to 5 regional captains, 2 security supervisors, and Grant's private attorney. Payments had funded vehicles, weapons surveillance, and false identification. The Bellucci's had received selected cross-shipping information, but they had not ordered the kidnapping. Grant had fed both sides enough suspicion to keep them near war. At Cross Consolidated, captains filled the boardroom and demanded retaliation. Victor Shaw struck the table with one hand. Grant has embarrassed this family. Every hour he breathes tells people we are weak. I placed Natalie's notebooks in front of me. Grant succeeded because people inside this organization were afraid to speak. Victor frowned. He succeeded because he is a traitor. He submitted false invoices for 14 months. Drivers were bribed. Security records were altered. Employees saw pieces of it. Then they should have reported it. To whom? To you. I looked around the room. Men avoided my eyes. A secretary reported it. No one answered. She told security. She told Grant. She told me. Victor's jaw tightened. This is not the time to blame yourself. It is exactly the time. I placed copies of the financial records on the table. Every account is frozen. Every captain named in these files is suspended. One man stood. You cannot remove us based on a woman's notes. Caroline Webb opened a folder. The notes led us to bank records, messages, and signed authorizations. The captain looked at me. Your father would have handled this privately. My father is dead because he trusted privacy more than truth. Silence moved through the room. I continued. Outside investigators will receive the financial records. Victor stared at me. You are opening the company to federal review. I am opening Grant's operation. You cannot control where they stop. No. The word disturbed them more than any threat. Admitting uncertainty had no place in the world my father created. That was why Grant expected me never to do it. One captain pushed away from the table. "This is weakness." I looked at him. Weakness is needing silence to remain in power. No one spoke again. Grant was captured on the 6th day. He had reached northern Michigan using false identification and planned to cross into Canada by boat. The man who revealed his location was a former cross driver named Luis Mendoza. 2 years earlier, Luis had been injured in a warehouse accident. Grant's office denied his pension because of a technical error. Natalie corrected it. She visited his wife, arranged physical therapy, and made sure his children remained on the company health plan. When Grant offered Luis money for transportation, Luis accepted. Then he called Mason. Grant had purchased loyalty with cash. Natalie had earned it through attention. Mason brought Grant back to Chicago in the rear of an armored vehicle. I met him in an interview room beneath one of our legal offices. His wrists were secured to the table. His silver hair was disordered. A bruise darkened one side of his face. He still smiled when I entered. There he is. I sat across from him. "You took Natalie. I protected the organization from a dangerous employee. You restrained her in a basement. She stole private records. She uncovered your accounts that kept this family strong. You were buying captains. I was preparing them. For what? For the day they finally understood you are not your father." I looked at him. "On that we agree." Grant leaned forward as far as the restraints allowed. "Your father built an empire. You are dismantling it for a secretary. She found your companies. She found your men. She survived your basement." His smile disappeared. "Do not reduce her because admitting what she is makes you feel small. She made you weak. No. I thought of the warehouse, the 2 paths, Grant's car disappearing toward the interstate while Natalie waited beneath the floor. She showed me where I already was." Grant leaned back. "What happens now? You put a bullet in my head and tell yourself you have changed? No." Something uncertain entered his eyes. "You face kidnapping, conspiracy, financial crimes, and attempted murder. You are handing me to the government. I am handing them the truth. Your father would be ashamed. My father taught me that killing a man solves what he did. I stood. Natalie taught me to consider what allowed him to do it." Grant pulled against the restraints. "You think the city will respect mercy? This is not mercy. I walked to the door. You wanted me to prove men like us never change. I looked back once. You do not get that victory." On the 8th morning, I woke in the chair beside Natalie's bed. Something touched my sleeve, her left hand. I raised my head. Her eyes were open. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then she looked at my shirt and whispered, "You look terrible." A sound left me. It might have been a laugh. It broke before it was complete. I reached for the call button. Doctors and nurses filled the room. Rebecca examined her eyes, checked her breathing, and asked questions about her name, the date, and where she was. Natalie answered slowly. When Rebecca asked whether she knew who I was, Natalie looked at me. Unfortunately, Rebecca almost smiled. After the room emptied, I remained near the door. Natalie noticed. "You have never asked permission to enter a room before. I am learning. Sit down." I moved to the chair beside her, her gaze lowered to the bandage around her right hand. "Will it work?" "The doctors believe you will regain movement." That was not my question. I forced myself to answer honestly. "They do not know how much." She closed her eyes. The silence lasted long enough to become painful. "I am sorry," I said. Natalie looked at me again. "For which part? All of it? That is convenient. I heard your warning and decided my priorities mattered more." "Yes." "I knew the names of every man who wanted me dead. I did not know you were afraid 10 feet from my office. I tried to tell you. I know. You heard me, Adrian. You simply believed there would always be another morning." There was no accusation in her voice now, only exhaustion. "That is true." She studied my face. "In the basement I kept thinking you would notice." My hands tightened together. I did. After how long? Too long. Every hour made me wonder whether I had imagined my importance to you. You were important. Her expression hardened. "That is not the same as making me feel important." The machines beside her continued their quiet rhythm. I had no defense. For once, I did not search for one. "You are right." She looked surprised. "You usually argue longer. I usually care more about winning. And now I care more about whether you believe me. That sounds like another thing you want. It is. I leaned forward. But you do not owe it to me. Natalie looked toward the window. I do not know if I can enter that building again. Then you never have to. My job will remain yours until you decide you do not want it. And if I never return, your salary, medical care, rehabilitation, and home will be protected. Her eyes returned to me. Are you buying forgiveness? No. Then what are you buying? Time. Safety, choices I should have protected before you needed them. She watched me carefully. You cannot manage my recovery like one of your companies. I know. No, you do not. Then tell me when I do it. And you will listen, yes. She gave a weak, humorless smile. You said that before. The words struck cleanly. I accepted them. I love you. Her face went still. I had imagined saying it under different circumstances, somewhere quiet, somewhere she could walk away without wires attached to her body. Perhaps that was why it needed to be said here, without control, without expectation. I loved the order you brought into my life before I understood I loved the woman creating it. I noticed what you did for me. I failed to notice what it cost you. Natalie's eyes filled, but she did not look away. You should not say that because you almost lost me. I am saying it because I spent 6 years refusing to name it. What do you want me to say? Nothing. You always want something, not this. I stood, but she caught my sleeve again. Her grip was weak. It stopped me. Love without attention is another form of hunger, Adrian. I looked at her hand against my coat. What does love with attention look like? Her eyes closed. Start by being here when I wake up. I sat back down. Hours passed. Sunlight moved across the hospital floor and disappeared. Doctors entered. Daniel brought coffee. Mason called twice. I remained in the chair. When Natalie opened her eyes again, the room was dark, except for the lights from the city. She looked toward me. I was still there. Natalie woke 3 more times that night. Each time her eyes found the chair beside the bed before anything else. Each time I was still there. I did not tell her about Grant. I did not tell her about the captains who had been removed the frozen accounts, or the investigators moving through cross-consolidated. Those facts belonged to the world outside her hospital room. Inside it, the only thing that mattered was whether she could drink water without becoming sick, whether the pain medication was working, and whether she wanted the door open. She always wanted it open. For the next 4 weeks, her recovery moved in small, uneven steps. The doctors removed the bandages from her right hand. The swelling had decreased, but 2 of her fingers remained almost completely numb. She could move her thumb. She could bend her wrist slightly. Every attempt sent pain through her forearm. The first time the physical therapist asked her to hold a pen, it slipped from her fingers and struck the floor. Natalie stared at it. The therapist bent to retrieve it. I can get it, Natalie said. She reached down with her left hand, picked up the pen, and placed it on the table. Again. The therapist looked at me. I had been invited to watch from the far side of the room. I said nothing. Natalie tried again. The pen fell. Her jaw tightened. Again. It took 14 attempts before she held it for 3 seconds. When the therapist ended the session, Natalie waited until the woman left. Then she turned her face toward the window. I knew enough not to call the 3 seconds a victory. Do you want me to leave? I asked. Yes. I stood. Her voice stopped me before I reached the door. Not because of you. I turned. She still faced the window. I know. I left anyway. In the corridor, Daniel sat with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to me. She hates being watched when she cannot do something. I know that now. You keep saying that. Because there is a great deal I know now. Daniel took a drink. Knowing is the easy part. I looked through the glass panel in the door. Natalie was trying to pick up the pen again. No, I said. It is not. She left the hospital after 31 days. Daniel wanted her to stay with him in Milwaukee, but Natalie refused to leave Chicago. She said she needed her own apartment, her own bed and street she recognized. I had a security system installed before she returned home. She made me remove half of it. No cameras inside the apartment, she said. They would cover the entrances. They would cover my life. The building has weaknesses. So do I. That does not give you permission to watch me sleep. I removed the cameras. 2 guards remained in vehicles across the street, but they changed shifts without entering the building. Natalie knew they were there. She accepted them for the first month. After that, she asked for one. By the third month, she asked for none. I agreed each time, though every part of me resisted. Grant had taught me how easily safety could be taken. Natalie was teaching me that protection forced upon someone could become another kind of confinement. I did not visit without calling. I did not send food unless she requested it. I did not speak to her doctors unless she invited me into the conversation. Some days she allowed me to drive her to therapy. Other days she asked Daniel or took a car alone. The first time she went alone, I sat in my office and checked my phone every 2 minutes. Mason noticed. She will call if she needs you. That has not always been true. She did call. I looked at him. You did not answer. The words were not meant to wound. They did. That was useful. Cross Consolidated changed while Natalie recovered. The changes began with doors. The heavy wooden doors on the executive floor were removed and replaced with glass. Meeting rooms no longer had locks controlled only by senior staff. Security access records were reviewed by an independent company with no connection to the Cross family. Employees received a direct reporting channel outside the executive structure. Every complaint created a record that could not be deleted by one person. Every security override required 2 approvals. Every contractor was verified before entering the building. The old captains hated it. They hated the outside attorneys more. They hated the investigators most of all. One afternoon, Victor Shaw entered my office without an appointment and placed his hands on my desk. You are letting strangers examine family business. They are examining crimes. Our business has never survived by making that distinction. Then it will learn. Victor looked through the glass wall toward the employees moving beyond my office. They are watching you. They always were. They are waiting to see whether you have become weak. I closed the report in front of me. Do you believe he studied my face? No. Then stop speaking for people who are afraid to speak for themselves. Victor left without another word. The following week he submitted every account under his control for review. Not everyone adapted. 3 executives resigned. 2 captains were charged with financial crimes. A security supervisor admitted helping Grant disable the garage cameras. He claimed he had believed Natalie would be questioned and released. I listened to his statement once. Then I left the room. There are apologies that reveal regret. His revealed only fear of consequences. I did not visit Grant. He requested me 4 times. I refused 4 times. Caroline handled every legal matter. The evidence was given to prosecutors. Grant's attorney attempted to argue that the kidnapping had been carried out without his direct knowledge. Natalie's recordings proved otherwise. In one of them, Grant said her name. He instructed the maintenance worker to keep her alive until she revealed where she had stored the account records. He also instructed them to leave her in the basement when the warehouse was set on fire. I heard the recording in a conference room with Mason and Caroline. Grant's voice remained calm throughout. When it ended, Caroline waited for me to speak. I looked at the dark screen. Send it. To the prosecutor, to everyone handling the case. Mason watched me. That is all, no. I stood. That is enough. 6 months after the warehouse, Chicago entered spring. The river turned green for the holiday crowds. Trees along the lake began showing new leaves. Rain replaced snow, though the wind still carried winter between the buildings. Natalie had regained movement in most of her right hand. Her ring finger remained numb. Her grip weakened after several minutes. She had learned to write with her left hand, though she disliked the uneven shape of the letters. She attended physical therapy twice a week and trauma counseling once a week. She did not sleep well. Sometimes she called me after midnight and said nothing for the first minute. I learned not to fill the silence. One night she called at 2:17. I answered on the first ring. "Are you awake?" she asked. "Yes, you are lying. I am awake now." A pause. I dreamed about the door. I sat up in bed. "Do you want me to come over?" "No, do you want Daniel? No. What do you need?" Her breathing moved softly through the phone. "Talk. About what?" "Something ordinary." I looked around my dark bedroom. Mason tried to make coffee today. Did anyone survive? The machine did not. A quiet sound came through the line. Not laughter. Close. I continued. He claimed the instructions were unclear. They consist of pictures. He distrusted the pictures. That sounds like Mason. We spoke for 20 minutes about nothing that mattered. The weather. a restaurant that had opened near the river. The orchid at reception, which Emily had nearly killed by watering it every day. Natalie eventually said, "I think I can sleep. I will stay on the phone. You do not have to. I know." She did not hang up. Neither did I. Her breathing slowed. I remained awake until morning. A week later, Natalie asked to visit Cross Consolidated. She chose a Tuesday because fewer executives would be present. I arrived at her apartment at 9. She wore a dark blue coat and black trousers. Her hair fell loose over her shoulders. A thin scar remained near her right wrist. She caught me looking at it. "Do not." I was not going to say anything. "You were thinking loudly." I opened the car door. She stopped. "I want to drive separately." I stepped back. Of course. Her eyes searched my face, perhaps waiting for resistance. I gave her none. She drove her own car. I followed several vehicles behind. At the entrance to Cross Consolidated, Natalie stood beneath the glass tower and looked up. Employees moved behind the lobby windows. Cars passed on the street. The revolving door turned slowly. She did not approach it. I stopped several feet away. Her right hand opened and closed at her side. "Do you want to leave?" I asked. "No. Do you want me beside you?" She looked at the doors, then at me. "Yes." I moved to her side. I did not touch her. We walked forward together. Inside, the security desk had been moved into the open lobby. The old private elevator had been disabled. Visitors passed through visible screening stations. Natalie stopped near the elevators. The underground garage entrance was visible through a glass corridor to the right. Her breathing changed. I heard it because I had learned to listen for small changes. "We can use the stairs," I said. "There are 42 floors. We can stop at every one." She almost smiled. Then she pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. No one was inside. Natalie stepped forward, then stopped again. I waited. She entered. I followed only after she looked at me. The ride lasted less than a minute. It felt longer than the night I had spent waiting outside surgery. When the doors opened on the executive floor, no one applauded. I had forbidden it. No one rushed toward her. I had forbidden that too. Emily stood at reception beside the orchid, her eyes filled with tears. "Hello, Natalie?" Natalie looked around the floor. The glass walls, the open doors, the new security station. Her old desk had been removed. For a moment I thought that would hurt her. Instead, she released a slow breath. "Hello, Emily." She walked through the office at her own pace. Employees greeted her quietly. Some asked how she was. She answered honestly. "Better today. Not fine, not recovered. Better today." At the far end of the floor, a new office waited beside the boardroom. The plaque on the wall read, "Natalie Hayes, Director of Employee Protection and Organizational Ethics." She stopped outside it. "I did not accept the position. No, you printed a plaque. The board approved the position. The name can be removed." She turned toward me. "Who does it report to an independent committee? Not you, no. Can you fire me? Not without a board review and documented cause. Can Grant's replacement overrule an investigation? No. Can I examine executive conduct? Yes, including yours, especially mine." She looked through the glass wall. The office contained a desk, a meeting table, and a door that could not lock automatically. On the wall was a framed page from the new employee protection policy. Natalie read it. "You wrote this, Caroline did. That explains the punctuation." I smiled. She entered the office. Her fingers moved across the edge of the desk. What would I actually control? Whistleblower protection, security complaints, employee welfare, executive misconduct reviews, contractor approval procedures. And if I think a company decision creates an unnecessary risk, you can stop it pending review. She faced me. "You are giving one person a great deal of authority. I am giving an office enough authority to matter. Why me? Because you understand the cost of what we failed to build." Her expression tightened. "My pain is not a qualification. No." I stepped away from the doorway. "Your judgment is. Your work before the kidnapping is. The respect employees already have for you is. What happened to you is not the reason you deserve authority." She studied me for several seconds. That was almost the right answer. "Which part was wrong? You still sound as though you are trying to persuade me." "I am. Why?" "Because I want you here. At least that is honest." She looked around the office once more. "I need time. You have it." 3 days later, she accepted. Her conditions filled 4 pages. She selected the independent committee. She approved her own staff. She required public reporting of confirmed executive violations. She demanded that every employee protection policy apply to Cross family members without exception. I signed the agreement without changing a word. Natalie began work 2 weeks later. She did not return to my schedule. She did not bring me coffee. She did not move my meetings or remind me to eat. The first month was more difficult than I expected. Not because she challenged me, because I had to learn how much of my life she had carried. I missed calls. I arrived late to 2 meetings. I ate terrible lunches. Mason enjoyed all of it. One morning I stood near reception attempting to operate the coffee machine. Natalie passed with a folder beneath her arm. "You are holding the filter upside down." "I know. You clearly do not." "I was testing it." "Of course," she continued toward her office. "Natalie." She stopped. I held up the empty coffee cup. "Would you like one?" Her eyes moved from the machine to me. "Can you make it without damaging the building?" "No promises." "Then yes." It became our first new routine. Not every day, only when our schedules crossed. I made the coffee. She corrected it when necessary. 4 months after returning, Natalie opened the Hayes Safety and Wellness Initiative. The program offered legal support, counseling, emergency housing, and security assistance to employees facing threats inside or outside the workplace. The opening took place in the main conference hall. I stood at the back. Natalie walked to the podium without notes. Her right hand rested lightly against the edge. "A safe workplace is not a place where nothing bad ever happens," she said. "It is a place where people can speak before danger becomes irreversible. It is a place where those with authority are required to listen." Her eyes found mine across the room. She held my gaze for 1 second. Then she continued. The speech belonged to her. I did not stand beside her. I did not allow my name to appear on the program. When the event ended, employees surrounded her. I waited near the exit. She joined me after the room had emptied. "You stayed in the back. It was your event. You wanted to come forward." "Yes, but you did not." "No." A small smile touched her mouth. "You are learning. I have an unforgiving teacher. You survived." "Barely." She laughed. This time it was real, not as free as the laugh in Daniel's photograph, but closer. That sound stayed with me for the rest of the day. The final resistance came from Victor. Natalie suspended a warehouse contract after discovering unsafe labor conditions and falsified inspection records. The contract belonged to a company controlled by one of Victor's cousins. He entered my office after midnight. "Tell her to release it." "No. The delay will cost us $3 million. Then we lose $3 million. She is overstepping. She is using the authority the board gave her." Victor moved closer. "You are letting her overrule family. She is protecting the family. People will think she controls you." I looked through the glass wall. Natalie sat in her office reading the inspection report. A cup of coffee rested beside her left hand. Her right hand lay open on the desk, the scar visible beneath the light. Only weak men confuse listening with surrender. Victor followed my gaze. Then he left. A few minutes later, Natalie entered my office. "You did not need to defend me. I was defending the policy." "Good answer." She placed the report on my desk. "You will need a new contractor by Friday. I thought you no longer managed my schedule. I manage consequences." She turned toward the door. "Natalie." She looked back. "Would you have dinner with me Friday?" Her face became unreadable. "Is this a mandatory executive meeting now?" "Will armed men stand outside the restaurant too?" "1. Agreed." She made me wait. "Yes," she said. We ate at a quiet restaurant near the river. No private room, no men clearing the entrance before us. Mason remained across the street with one guard and complained about the arrangement by text. I ignored him. After dinner, Natalie and I walked beside the water. Chicago lights moved across the river in broken lines. Her hand brushed mine once. Then again. I did not reach for it. She took my hand first. Her injured fingers did not close completely. I did not tighten my grip. "You once told me power meant entering any room without fear," she said. "I was younger, it was last year. I have aged." She looked toward the river. "What do you think it means now I watch the people passing us?" A couple arguing softly. A man carrying a sleeping child. 2 women laughing near the bridge. Making sure the person beside you does not have to be afraid either. Natalie was quiet. Then she asked, "Do you still think you were too late?" I looked at the scar around her wrist. "I was too late to stop them from hurting you." "Yes, Too late to keep you from learning how easily I could fail you. Yes. I met her eyes. But not too late to spend the rest of my life becoming someone who will not. She did not promise forever. Natalie never gave what had not been earned. Start with tomorrow, she said. 7:15, 8. Why 8? I no longer manage your mornings. What happens at 8? You bring me coffee. The next morning, I arrived at her office carrying 2 cups. The door was closed. I stopped outside. For most of my life, doors existed to be opened by force, authority, or fear. I raised my hand and knocked. Natalie looked up from her desk. I waited. Come in, she said. Only then did I open the door. Men in Chicago still lowered their voices when they spoke my name. Once I believed that silence meant respect. Now I knew silence could mean fear, neglect, or a warning no one felt safe enough to say aloud. I found Natalie in a basement beneath a building my family had forgotten. I was one day too late to save her from every scar. 6 years too late to understand what she had been carrying. Almost a lifetime too late to become the man she had once believed I could be. She survived. She spoke. This time I listened. And when Natalie Hayes chose to remain beside me, I knew it was not because she was trapped by duty, fear, money, or the weight of my name. She stayed because the door was open. She stayed because she could leave. She stayed because the choice was finally hers.